Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha, Gopinath Radha, Gopinath Shri Radhe. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शतशिष्यमणि divine grace of Chanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada की जय ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय श्री श्री राधा गोपीनाथ भगवान की जय जय निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरे वो ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमा श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नंदनाय च नंदगोपकुमाराय गोविंदाय नमो नमः. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter number 7, Further Inquiries by Vidura, Text number 3. Kridayam udyamorvasya Kridayam udyamorvasya Kamaschikriti-sanyata Kamaschikriti-sanyata Svatastriptasya chakatam Svatastriptasya chakatam Nirvitasya sadhanyataha Nirvitasya sadhanyataha Kridayam udyamorvasya Kamaschikriti-sanyataha Svatastriptasya chakatam Svatastriptasya chakatam Nirvitasya sadhanyataha Kridayam udyamorvasya Kamaschikriti-sanyataha Svatastriptasya chakatam Nirvitasya sadhanyataha Kridayam udyamorvasya Kamaschikriti-sanyataha Svatastriptasya chakatam Nirvitasya sadhanyataha
Kridayam udyamorvasya
Kamaschikriti-sanyataha
Svatastriptasya chakatam Nirvitasya sadhanyataha Kridayam udyamorvasya Kamaschikriti-sanyataha Svatastriptasya
chakatam Nirvitasya sadhanyataha Kridayam in the matter of playing. Udyamaha, enthusiasm. Arbasya, of the boys. Kamaha, desire. Chikridisha, willingness to play. Anyataha, with other boys. Swatatriptasya, for one who is self-realized. For one who is self-satisfied. Cha, also. Katam, what for? Nirvitasya, one who is detached. Sada, at all times. Anyataha, otherwise. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Charnaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Boys are enthusiastic to play with other boys or with various diversions because they are encouraged by desire. But there is no possibility of such desire for the Lord because He is self-satisfied and detached from everything at all times. Purport: since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is one without a second, there is no possibility that anything besides Him can exist. He expands Himself by His energies in multi forms of self-expansions and separated expansions as well, just as fire expands itself by heat and light. Since there is no other existence besides the Lord Himself, the Lord's association with anything manifests His association with Himself. In Bhagavad Gita chapter 9 text 4, the Lord says, Mayatatamidam sarvam jagadavyakta murtina matstani sarvabhutani nachaham te shavastitaha. The complete manifestation of the cosmic situation is an expansion of the Lord Himself in His impersonal feature. All things are situated in Him only, yet He is not in them. That is the opulence of the Lord. That is the opulence of the Lord's attachment and detachment. He is attached to everything, yet He is detached from all. Translation again: boys are enthusiastic to play with other boys or with various diversions because they are encouraged by desire. But there is no possibility of such desire for the Lord because He is self-satisfied and detached from everything at all times. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Khadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parichana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarobhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, continuing on with Srimad Bhagavatam, we've now entered chapter 7 after Maitreya has described to Vidura about the Vishwarupa, the cosmic manifestation of the creation of the universal form. Now Maitreya hears from Vidura another question about how the Lord interacts with his material energy. Nityo Nityo Nam Chetnas Chetna Nam. It's mentioned of all conscious living entities, Krishna is the supreme consciousness. And of all individual eternal living entities, he is the supreme eternal individual. And it is this supreme personality of Godhead who has nothing to do. Natasya karyam karanam cha vidyate natat samaschabhyatigascha dushyate parasya shaktir vividheva shuyate swabhavaki jnana balakriya cha. That the Lord has nothing really to do. Natasya karyam karanam cha vidyate. If he wants anything to be performed, parasya shaktir vividheva shuyate. He has many manifold potencies that he can use. Multifarious potencies, as Prabhupada says. Swabhavika jnana bala kriya cha. It is all performed by the swabhava jnana bala and kriya shaktis. Of course, he has many shaktis. This particular verse is referring to these three. So the Lord performs his activities. If he wants anything done, his potencies automatically carry it out. You'll often hear Prabhupada talk about the natural sequence of things. When the phenomenal and the phenomenal and nominal worlds, Prabhupada talks in the Bhagavad Gita how things happen by the natural sequence of things. So for Krishna, everything happens naturally, and naturally means there's no exertion from his side. Simply by his desire, things are happening. But interestingly enough, in this verse, it's mentioned that he has no such desire. Just as boys are enthusiastic to play with other boys, or with various diversions because they are encouraged by desire, there's no possibility of such desire for the Lord, because he is self-satisfied and detached from everything at all times. So the Lord does not display the same material desires as we experience in this material world. As yesterday's purport, Prabhupada talks about, Krishna is Saguna. He is also at the same time Nirguna. So Prabhupada, I remember I first came across this reading Science of Self-Realization. And their first book, one of the first books I read, Prabhupada, it stuck strongly in the consciousness, because Prabhupada very simply explains, generally when you come across, at least I've come across different spiritual schools, so to speak, that talk about the absolute truth. And whenever it comes to propounding or giving their philosophy, they're very, I guess, not completely holistic in their approach. They will very heavily denounce all philosophies against them, and using that sort of as a platform, then they'll preach their philosophy. So here, when I read Prabhupada saying that many people call the Lord Nirguna, you'd automatically think that Prabhupada would defend saying, actually Krishna is not Nirguna. So the general tendency is to reject what other people say and then to propound your own philosophy. But what I found was that the Vedic literature and Srila Prabhupada very easily explained that actually the Lord is Nirguna, but it needs to be explained properly. How is Krishna Nirguna? He is Nirguna because he's without the modes or without the touch of material energy. And he's Saguna because he has his own internal potency. So if one is able to understand Krishna and how he interacts with his energies and how his energies interact with him, then it's very easy to overcome the contaminations of this material world. Many of the Lord's activities, especially that he performs through his internal potencies, is extremely bewildering. Because the Lord, when he performs his activities with his Yogamaya potency, it is already beyond our conceivable or limit of our understanding. Because the Lord is known as Adhokshaja, he is beyond our senses. Already, he is beyond our senses. So to be able to perceive his activities along with his potencies, it is completely inconceivable. So therefore there's the separated energy which we are currently in contact with. And this separated energy, Prabhupada mentions many times that it is the same or equivalent to the Lord. So the Lord and his energies are Shakti, Shaktimatayora Bedha. They're non-different. The separated energy is non-different from the Lord, but at the same time different. As Prabhupada is quoting the 9th chapter, 4th verse of Bhagavad Gita, that all things are situated in him, but he is not in them. Matstani sarva bhutani nachaham teshvavastitaha. Prabhupada in another small book I read, first book, Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, there Brahmatirtha Prabhu asks Prabhupada about the separated energy. And Prabhupada gives this magnificent example to help us understand what separated energy is and how it's in relation to the Lord. Because I remember Prabhupada mentions this, and it was a very interesting point. Prabhupada saying that the problem is that we consider the spiritual energy, we understand to a certain extent there's Krishna and there's energy, but we somehow or other come up with this very egoistic idea that, okay, Krishna, you have your Yogamaya potency and we have this Mahamaya. This is for us to enjoy and that's for you to enjoy. So that's your jurisdiction and this is our jurisdiction. We'll enjoy here, you enjoy there, don't disturb us. So then Prabhupada gives this example of what actually this separated energy is. Because this separated energy is Krishna's and it is Krishna. Both at the same time. How is that? Just as a cow gives milk, it is mentioned that the cow and the milk are not different. The milk is dependent on the cow, but the cow is not dependent on the milk. The existence of milk means cow exists. The cow must exist for milk to exist. But just because for the milk to exist doesn't mean that the cow has to exist. So in other words, Prabhupada is saying the separated energy of the Lord is non-different from the Lord, but the Lord is not dependent upon it. So Prabhupada gives another example of separated energy. Prabhupada often refer how he would speak into the mic and that would be recorded. But then some disciple will then hear that lecture. But it is not like Prabhupada's physically there, but Prabhupada is there at the same time. So this separated energy, Prabhupada gives these examples for understanding. That it is non-different from the Lord, but at the same time not the Lord Himself. Now, how does the Lord interact with such an external energy? This is the subject matter of these next two cantos, this canto and the next canto, Sarga and Visarga. How does He interact with material energy? Because it's very important to understand the nature of the Lord. Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti tattvaha takva deha punarjanma nayati soati arjuna. I remember once Hemang Chaitanya Prabhu was giving a class in the evening. I think it was a Sunday feast or just a normal class in the evening. And he was a festival class. And he was asking all the devotees here, what was Prabhupada's most famous verse quoted in Bhagavad Gita? Or what was Prabhupada's favorite verse quoted in Bhagavad Gita? And he actually quoted an instance where Prabhupada asked the devotees, his disciples, what is the most important verse in Bhagavad Gita? And the disciple said, Sarva Dharman Parityajya Prabhupada, that is the most important verse. Another devotee said, Manmaya Manmana Bhavan Bhaktos, that's the important verse. And so Prabhupada said, no. Then Prabhupada said, Janma Karma Chame Divyam Evam Yoveti Tatvadaha. This is the very important verse. And Prabhupada explains that if you just simply understand Krishna's birth, nature of His birth and activities, you no longer take birth in this material world. What does that mean? To understand Janma. Janma doesn't really exist for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's known as Aja, unborn. He's Anadir Adir Govinda. He doesn't have a cause, He's the cause. He's not born. So for such lotus-eyed Lord, then to understand that He comes in contact, Janma, with the material nature, immediately a flag should go up that something's not right here. How is it that the Supreme Lord who is unborn, we need to understand His characteristics or His activities of being born? Janma karma chame divyam. How is it that Supreme Personality of Godhead who has no activities to perform, He performs activities? Janma karma chame divyam. And those qualities of janma and karma, they are of the quality of divyam, transcendental. This is what we need to understand. So this is a very great fortune, and we're very blessed to be able to understand this particular subject matter by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because to be able to understand Krishna from within our limited vision is not possible. Prabhupada says, for the bound to become unbound, it's not possible. You need the help of those who are unbound to be bound. Another example, it's mentioned the Supreme Lord's lotus feet are like a boat. And the saintly personalities, they're able to cross over the ocean of material nescience by taking shelter of such a boat. But they're so merciful that by using the boat, and even though they get to the other side, they somehow or other leave it on this side for our benefit, so that we may be able to use it to get over this material existence. So we are indebted to the spiritual master and the Guru Parampara, who are given this opportunity to read Srimad Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada's very expert, because Prabhupada was, it's mentioned he's eloquent, or kavi, poet. He's able to give the most complicated subject matter in the most simplest format, in the simplest terms. In layman terms, Prabhupada says. I remember Prabhupada saying that he meditates so much on how to explain the subject matter so that even a layman can understand. And in this age of Kali, everyone's a layman, because who can understand the qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Here are a couple of examples I'll touch upon. Prabhupada's given in the previous purport to help us understand a bit about this one, because sometimes we'll see in Prabhupada's writings, Prabhupada will give us mercy, so much understanding in the one purport, and the next couple of purports there's not much there. But sometimes Prabhupada doesn't give anything, and then later on Prabhupada gives. So when you read Prabhupada's books, if we read in a sort of narrow mind, we won't be able to see the whole context of things. Whereas if you read the whole chapter and see how Prabhupada's explaining each of the verses, then it's very nice to understand. Here Prabhupada's explaining about how Krishna is nirguna. Because to be able to understand how Krishna is self-satisfied and detached but still performs these activities, we need to understand how he interacts with material nature. So he is nirguna, not in touch with material energy, just as the restrictions of a prison house doesn't affect the king. So the king can go into the prison house, and the king is able to interact with the prisoners and see how they are going. But it is not that the king is also subject to the rules of the prison house. In fact, the king can even choose to liberate a prisoner from within the prison house or the jail. So this is the prerogative of the Lord. Prabhupada has previously mentioned. This is the Lord's priority, or his own particular desires, that he can do whatever he likes even though there are restrictions within the material world. Avajananti ma mudha manushim tanam ashitaha. I can't remember the last one. Is manushim tanam ashitaha. Yeah, another verse is coming. Actually, in the next verse to this one, Prabhupada says 9.5. In this 9.4, Maya tatam idam sarvam jagat apektumurtina matstani sarva bhutani nachaham teshvavastitha nachamatstani bhutani yoga paschame yoga maishwaryam bhuta brin nacha bhutasto mamatma bhuta bhavana. That second verse is very nice. At least for me, it's very nice, because it puts us in our place. Because in one sense we'll say, oh yeah, the Lord's, Maya tatam idam sarvam jagat avektamurtina, he's not there but he's there. Nachamatstani bhutani, but everything rests. Nachamatstani bhutani, they can't rest without me. Paschime yogam aishwaram, just see my mystic opulences. Bhuta brin nacha bhutasto mamatma bhuta bhavana. That actually the Lord is the reservoir or the shelter of all living entities. Actually he's Bhuta Brin, the maintainer or the sustainer of the living entities. So Krishna emphasizes that although he's there and not there, still everything is dependent upon him. So the king's law can be, another one Prabhupada says here, the prisoners are condemned by the king's law, but the law is never affected by such implications. So here Prabhupada gives another interesting point, because yesterday I was just doing a bit of work on Krishna's 6 opulences. And it's very interesting. Prabhupada mentions here that in the Vishnu Purana, the 6 opulences of the Lord are stated to be non-different from him. So when we explain to everyone that Bhagavan means Aishwaryasya Samagrasya Viryasya Yashasasya Jnana Vairagyasya Sannam Bhagan itin Gana, that Parashar Muni has mentioned in his Vishnu Purana, that the Lord is full of the opulences of strength, knowledge, beauty, wealth, detachment, and fame. Yeah. So here Prabhupada is saying that although we perceive of these things within the material world, they're simply reflections of the original potency the Lord possesses. So when we describe Krishna as Bhagavan, then Krishna has these potencies, these spiritual potencies. They're not the separated energy or material energy. And we heard in a previous class that sometimes the Lord, being extremely pleased with his devotees and wanting to glorify them, then he bestows upon them that benediction of being also called as Bhagavan, because he imbues them with such potencies as well. So here the Lord possesses or personally displays such opulences in the material world, but they have no connection with the modes of nature. So there's a nice example. I mean, the whole of Krishna's pastimes stands testimony to this. But I was reading yesterday, so it's the first thing that comes to mind. Two things. One of the pastimes of Lord Balaram and the pastimes of Lord Krishna in Dwarka, his daily pastimes. And I especially love the pastimes of Balaram because this time when this round of reading, I never realized that Parikshit Maharaj actually asks Sukadev Goswami, please tell me more about Balaram's pastimes. We don't hear much about Balaram's pastimes, at least when I first read Krishna book. But it's very nice to have read a bit more pastimes, or at least registered a bit more of the activities of Lord Balaram. So I was reading about how at one particular point in time after Narakasura had been killed, then his friend Dvivida appeared in the province of Anartha, in which Dwarka was present, being the capital of Anartha, which is Krishna's own I guess, area of influence as a king. The Yadu's district of rulership. So there it's mentioned that Dvivida, he was the brother of Mainda. And as we heard yesterday, that Mainda was a minister that was present in the court of Sugriva, who came in contact with Lord Ram. But unfortunately, Dvivida and Mainda, both of them, came under bad influence or bad association. Just as Bhaumasura, Narakasura, had the bad association of Banasura, similarly Dvivida and Mainda had the bad association of Bhaumasura or Narakasura. And when Narakasura was killed and Krishna took the 16,000 queens away, 16,100 queens away, then Dvivida got extremely upset. It's natural when one it's very interesting, the mentality, that actually the association he had was pretty bad. The association that these two had were on the basis of sense gratification, which is even worse, because as soon as the sense gratification stopped between them two, then naturally there would be quarrel and they'd, fight and disappear, and such friendship wouldn't exist anymore. But see here, Dvivida's, unfortunately, his anger was not because Narakasura was killed, but his anger was more so that his sense gratification was stopped. Because ultimately on the material platform it's two things. It's either the direct sense gratification or indirect. The personal sense gratification or the extended sense gratification. The closest thing to, I guess, love is the mother's love for the child. But that in itself is still contaminated, Prabhupada says. Because the love the mother has is only for her child. She doesn't have the same love for other children. So this Dvivida being contaminated in such a way, he decided to cause problems throughout the province of Anartha. So in Anartha what he would do, he would go to different villages and he would decimate, demolish, destroy villages. He would get mountains, he'd lift the mountain and completely smash villages. He would go around stealing, pilfering, pillaging, and he would go around contaminating the young women of respectable families. And he'd be going around enjoying in such a way to the extent that he went and started passing urine and stool in the sacrificial fires of the sages present there. It's very similar to what Balvala did, the demon later on in Krishna book. When the Kurukshetra war happens, Balaram decides, I'm not taking part, I'm going on pilgrimage. Then he comes upon Romahashana Sutta. He kills Romahashana Sutta, long story short. And then the sages say, you've done this and you please, we've already blessed him with such long life and potency to be able to preach this Krishna consciousness. So therefore, Balaram says, actually the son, Sutta. Did I mention the right name? Sutta Goswami. He becomes the... because he is the son of the father, and the son and the father are non-different, so therefore Balaram transfers the blessings onto the son and gives him the blessings. And then the sages say, my dear Lord, under the pretext of having performed these so-called sinful activity, please we require you to kill this demon on our behalf as well. Because you're here, he's causing so much problem. He's passing urine and stool on our sacrifice, and he's raining blood and pus and he's causing such a disturbance. So then Balaram comes and Balwala appears, and Balaram doesn't take too much time. He just gets his plow, expands it, pulls the demon down by the neck and kills him in that way. So in the same way, this Dvivida was causing a problem. But interestingly enough, at that particular point in time, when he was performing these activities, he heard sweet music and songs being played and sung coming from the Raivataka mountain. And so he decided to go there and see what was happening. At that time, Balaram was with young women, not gopis, but the young women of Dwarka, his specific entourage that he had in Dwarka, Puri. And he was enjoying in the forest with them, with Varuni. So the Lord was always with his Varuni. And he was intoxicated and enjoying pastimes. But we must never make the same mistake Yamuna Devi did, or Srimati Yamuna. The Kalindi made the same mistake, that the Lord is intoxicated, therefore I won't listen to him. But actually the Lord's intoxication is not equivalent to the intoxication we see in this material world. His intoxication is of a spiritual nature. So although he may be intoxicated, eyes rolling, still he's fully aware of his surroundings. He's fully cognizant of what's happening. Because when we say intoxicated, when someone is not sober or intoxicated, they're tipsy, they don't have their cognitive potency or cognitive understanding, they're unable to check their senses, so on and so forth. But just see this, if someone comes and disturbs your sense gratification, we immediately become angry and retaliate. But Lord Balaram in this pastime, he didn't immediately retaliate. What happened was Dvivida came, and it's mentioned that this ape, I find it very funny that he's described as an ape, not a gorilla, not a varnara, not a monkey, but an ape. The idea of an ape has a very strong imprint in the consciousness as some dumb animal. You ape, that sort of understanding. So Dvivida, the ape, he appeared in the scene, and he appeared swinging from branch to branch. And then when he saw what was happening, he announced his presence by shaking the branches of the tree, disturbing the singing, and started shouting kila kila, just to disturb the musical performances and the enjoyment of Lord Balaram. And as soon as they stopped and saw, the young lady saw this monkey, and seeing the ape there, they started laughing because he started doing really weird things, jumping from branch to branch and showing really weird caricatures, like showing his teeth and moving his eyebrows and moving his eyes and everything. So for young girls, it's mentioned that because of their age and their position, they just found it really funny. Some weird monkey just appeared on the scene and is just performing these activities. And Balaram knew what was happening, but he kept quiet. Not because he was intoxicated. He was waiting to see what this monkey was going to do. So then, interestingly, it's not Krishna who defeated Dvivida. It was Balaram who defeated Lakshmana. Anyway, side point. So then Dvivida, he started ramping up his offenses. He started coming before the young girls, and he started doing really weird things, urinating and passing stool in front of them, showing his private parts to them, and he started doing all of these things. And then he didn't stop there. The stupid ape didn't stop there. You know what he did? While Balaram was standing there, he took Balaram's Varuni. He took Balaram's Varuni, and in front of Balaram started imitating him and teasing him. And he broke Balaram's Varuni and started tugging at the clothes of the young women. So it was like a direct challenge to Lord Balaram. And it's mentioned Balaram he didn't tolerate. At that point, his eyes grew copper red, and he showed such anger that it was very intolerable, that he immediately manifested his club and his plow. And he came before this monkey. And this monkey, seeing the situation, immediately picked up a shala tree. It's mentioned shala tree is a very sturdy tree. It's a very strong tree. And he picked up and de-leafed it, and then he chucked it, or he swung it to smash it on Lord Balaram's head. As he swung it down to smash it on Balaram's head, in the summary, it's mentioned that it didn't affect Balaram, but the details of the purport, it's mentioned that Balaram smashed it with his club into smithereens. And this monkey, being surprised, then again got another tree and started smashing Balaram. And Balaram smashed that as well. And again they fought in this way until the whole forest was deforested. There was no trees around whatsoever. And it's mentioned this monkey then took shelter of rocks. And this, when taking shelter of rocks, he started raining these rocks. Just like Indra rained or tried to demolish Vrindavan with his rainfall. You can imagine, it's described that he threw rocks that rained upon Balaram. Boulders and rocks and other stuff. And it's mentioned that when these rocks came, Balaram very easily, nonchalantly just destroyed all of these rocks into small pebbles and dust. It didn't affect him so much. And then Dvita, being very extremely angry with Lord Balaram, then came forward with his strong shala, he's mentioned shala tree like arms. His arms were very strong. And he grabbed his fists and he pounded on Balaram's chest. And it's mentioned that Balaram felt nothing. It hit him in the chest and he didn't feel anything. And Balaram decided to play along, because Kshatriya code or principle is that when the enemy is unarmed, you should not fight with any arms. So therefore he gave up his plow and his mace, and he struck Dvita in the neck. The collarbone is mentioned. He struck him there and finished. Dvita was finished. In the previous purport, actually, in the previous chapter, it's mentioned that we were talking about how Lord Brahma, even after so much meditation, after so many years of meditation, could not understand the qualities of the Lord or the potency of the Lord. Prabhupada says in the end of that purport, Mahatmas are not concerned with knowing the Lord by mental speculation, because they enjoy hearing about His glorious activities in His transcendental dealings with His devotees or with the demons. The devotees take pleasure in both and are happy in this life and the next. So the devotees are satisfied just simply by hearing such pastimes of the Lord. So it apparently looked like Lord Balaram succumbed to anger. It apparently looked like Lord Balaram succumbed to intoxication. It apparently looked like Lord Balaram ended the life of other living entity because his sense gratification was being stunted. The key word is apparent, because the Lord's activities are chinmaya ras. They are of the spiritual nature. And this is further highlighted when, after all of these things, Sukadeva Goswami then describes how one day Narad Muni decided to go and visit Krishna in Dwarka. After he had heard he had married all the queens individually, he had expanded himself and married each one of them at the same time. He wanted to go and visit the 16,108 palaces of Lord Krishna. And there it's mentioned that the description of Dwarka, it's mentioned in Krishna book and Srimad Bhagavatam, that Dwarka was arranged in such a way that even the opulences or the demigods who have such opulences in the heavenly planet could not even conceive of such opulences of Dwarka. Of course, because it's Vaikuntha Dham, it's non-different from the Lord's original abode. So in that place of Dwarka, Narad Muni entered into the main palace, or the palace of Srimati Rukmani Devi. And there he saw Krishna seated there. And when Krishna was seated there, then it's mentioned that a couple of details were given. First of all, Krishna was seated on the bedstead of Srimati Rukmani Devi. And it's mentioned that although Srimati Rukmani Devi had thousands of maidservants who were equal to her in her characteristics, her opulence, the way she dressed, still Rukmani took up the opportunity to serve Krishna personally herself. And I was thinking, if Rukmani had thousands of maidservants that were equal to her, what stood out that made her give more pleasure to the Lord? It's mentioned, although I was thinking there, it's mentioned, yes, opulence, they possess the same characteristics, guna, they possess the same opulences, the same characteristics, this dress as well, but they did not possess the same amount of devotion that Srimati Rukmani Devi had. So therefore Srimati Rukmani Devi was personally serving the Lord, because she knew that she could give the topmost pleasure, and her maidservants knew that we're simply there to serve and facilitate her service to Krishna. So as Dwarkadish was getting fanned by Srimati Rukmani Devi, then Narada Muni appeared, and immediately Krishna stopped the whole thing and came forward and received Narada Muni, paid obeisances to him, bathed his lotus feet, and sprinkled the water on his head and all of the members of his household. And very interesting there is that Narad Muni, he understood the whole situation. What went through Narad Muni's mind? What went through Narad Muni's mind is that Krishna is Brahmanya Deva. He favors the Brahmanas. Therefore, he is incarnated into the material world to teach others how to favor the Brahmanas. You see, Krishna's lotus feet are the source of the most holy Ganges, but he took the water from Narad Muni's feet because he wanted to enjoy the pastimes of being a perfect human being and to set an example to others. This is Krishna's Nara Lila. It appears that Krishna is an ordinary human being, but Krishna is not. Anyway, so Narad Muni visits all the other palaces and so on and so forth. To fast forward, and it's mentioned there that Narad Muni was actually quite bewildered because he entered another palace. You see, Narad Muni entered Dwarka knowing the potency of the Lord, the Yogamaya Shakti in action. He wanted to see how she was working, but he still got bewildered because the way Krishna works. Okay, I'll give you the example. It's mentioned the next house or the next palace that Narad Muni entered. At that time, Krishna was playing dice with his queen and Uddhava. And as soon as Krishna saw Narad Muni, he acted as if he had no recollection of meeting him in the previous palace. And Narad Muni was very astonished by this. How is it at the same time the Lord's here, and the Lord also doesn't display his remembrance of meeting me before? So as soon as that finished, and Krishna said, "What would you like? How can I serve you? What is the purpose of you coming here?" Narad Muni just got up and left. Narad Muni didn't say anything. He just got up and left. And he went to the next palace, and he went to the next palace, and then he went to the next palace. And it's mentioned he went to so many different palaces, he was astonished. Because every time he went there, Krishna worshipped him. Every time he went there, Krishna was doing something different. And more astonishingly that we can also understand is that Krishna was performing activities that you'd perform at different times of the day at the same time. So the same time Narad Muni went to visit, in that same time period, like say for example, if Narad Muni went to visit the Lord during the morning time, the Lord was performing his activities of early morning Brahma Muhurta. The Lord was performing his morning activities of giving charity. The Lord was performing his noontime activities of taking prasad, playing with his children. Evening activities such as water sports. And then nighttime activities of lying down and hearing his own glories. Other things like hearing his histories. Sunset, he'd be in Mona, just chanting his Gayatri after offering oblations to the sacrificial fire. All of these activities you generally see happen at different parts of the day were being performed at the same time, at that same moment that Narad Muni was going to visit. So naturally Narad Muni would become bewildered. Hey, I just visited this palace. He was in the morning, he was just playing dice, and now he's doing his morning activities. It's the same day, and I'm still... So this bewildered Narad Muni, he became extremely astonished. There it's mentioned that only by serving the lotus feet of Krishna can one begin to comprehend the mystic power of Krishna, which Brahma and Shiva could not fully comprehend. And we are less than Brahma and Shiva, right? So it's very difficult to understand. But what we can understand here is that although Krishna performed his Naralila, he was not affected by any of these things. Because immediately after this, or previously as well, Sukadeva Goswami mentions that although Krishna enjoyed such pastimes with his wives of Dwarka, still he was detached. Still he was not affected. He was not dependent on such activities, being self-satisfied. So he could immediately renounce his wives and then go to his court. He could immediately leave them and perform his activities, his dharma, to set an example, and then immediately go, taking the help of Dharaka, and go to his sabha, his meeting place with the other kings and ministers. So it's inspired by seeing the Supreme Personality of God as in activities. Narad Muni wishes to preach widely his glories. There's an important point here. Narad Muni, although Krishna was many forms, 16,108, it's mentioned that each person in each palace could not see the Lord in the other district. So if the person in Rukmani's district went to Satyabhama's district, although Krishna was present there, only the residents in the district of Satyabhama could see Krishna there in that palace. The resident of Rukmini Devi that went to visit that palace or the district of Satyabhama did not see Krishna there in that palace or that area. So Krishna performed his mystic potency in that way. It's mentioned also that Krishna didn't just expand himself like he expands, the Purusha avatars. Each palace was Krishna, Swayam Bhagavan himself. It was the same personality there. So Narad Muni naturally would become astonished at Krishna's potency. Narad Muni saw it because he desired to see it, and Narad Muni saw it because Krishna desired to show it. So again, emphasizing the fact that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the one that possesses the opulences. Krishna can choose to do whatever he likes. He is not answerable to anyone. But at the same time, he chooses to become answerable to his devotees. It appears that the Lord is under the control of material nature, but that is not the case. Krishna's activities stand to testify that he is the controller of material energy. But he chooses to come under the potency of or so-called activities or human characteristics, just to attract the minds of the devotees and the conditioned souls. One to enhance the devotees' bhakti and the other to attract them back home, back to Godhead. And we should always understand that he is attached to everything, but he is detached. Achintya beda beda tattva. So the Lord, he is one with his energy, Sakti Sakti Matayora Bedha. They are non-different, but at the same time is different from his energy. And we'll read a bit more about this, how Maitreya Muni explains to Vidura how the Lord, although performing activities within the material world, appearing so-called as a human being, how, although connected with material modes of nature, he was unaffected, and still he manifested his transcendental pastimes. It's one thing to be unaffected by material nature, the other is to perform your activities with the spiritual potency without being affected by material nature. Okay, so I'll end here. Are there any questions before we finish? Otherwise we'll end class. Okay, thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande.